Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and we are joined over Skype by Rob Kirby of KirbyAnalytics.com. Very insightful man. We are always happy to have him here with us, so thank you very much for joining us again, Mr. Kirby.
My pleasure to be with you guys.
Absolutely. Now, let's get right to the chase because so many insane things have happened in the last while. So, while M0 seems to be in an unusual downturn as cash and coin is being pulled out of circulation in the United States, Nobel Prize-winning Professor Joseph Stiglitz was calling for a cashless society at the World Economic Forum in Davos. Do you think the U.S. is headed towards a cashless society?
Not while Donald Trump is the president. I don't believe that has a hope in Hades of happening.
So you don't think it's going to happen, but I mean there has been this push. We've been looking at this trend with M0, and it's a very unusual trend. I don't think we've ever seen this kind of
not with the United States.
No, and of course with India pulling 86% of their currency or their cash and coin out of circulation, there's that worry and that concern that I think a lot of people have that we will be going cashless.
Well, I agree with you. There's always the worry that the powers that be or the globalists may attempt such a thing. But I truly believe that Donald Trump is very well up the curve with regards to globalist plans for the world. Just remember that his chief advisor is Steve Bannon, formerly the head of Breitbart News. And the Breitbart News organization is very, very aware of what the globalists have been trying to accomplish on the monetary and financial front around the world. And I think we're probably more likely to see Donald Trump sign an executive order asking for an audit of the U.S. sovereign gold reserve than we are for him to get behind the wet dream of the Keynesian-minded Federal Reserve to get on board with any sort of initiative towards getting rid of cash.
Yeah,
I guess in short, I really think that the war on cash, from an American perspective, is absolutely and utterly dead in the water now, because Donald Trump is not on board with globalist thinking, and Donald Trump is an extremely well-read human being. And Donald Trump is not going to be having any of it.
No, that's very good. And of course, the book that came out just for a little while ago from Kenneth Rogoff saying The Curse of Cash. And of course, you have Ben Bernanke talking about how great the book was. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm from Scandinavia, and in Scandinavia, we've seen something very different because we're still heavily under the globalized system, under the United Nations and all of its underlying organizations. So what we're seeing in Scandinavia is a definite push, and of course Sweden, I very much look over Sweden, and M0 in Sweden has been halved since the 1999. So they're definitely going to push for this. Like, their goal is to get it implemented in the country, and as you said, it's not going to be implemented in the United States, which is great, but we still have to fight this in other countries. And of course, that they want to have this negative interest rates. They want to have this cashless society so they can implement the negative interest rates and do bail-ins and asset freezes so much easier, because if you have that cash available to pull out of the banking system, now they can't at all pull this off, right?
I mean, that's true. Look, a big part of the push for digital currency around the world on the part of the globalists has been born out of their wanton need and desire to track everything and all that people do. Look, under the previous two administrations with Obama and Bush Jr., we've absolutely seen a rise of the surveillance state in the United States, with the adoption of the Patriot Act and the expansion of powers of the NSA. My feeling is that Donald Trump is going to do much to, as he says, return power to the states and return power to the people. And my guess is the deep state has much to be concerned about with Donald Trump, the president of the United States right now. And of course, there's the corollary to that, with Donald Trump not being a fan necessarily of the surveillance state. Maybe Donald Trump should be a little wary of his well-being going forward.
Yeah, I mean, the surveillance state, it's hard to say, too, because there have been a few flip-flops on that avenue as well, where he has talked about increasing surveillance on everyday citizens, and even bragging about how it would be great to surveil people even more so than the NSA was caught doing several years ago. But, of course, it is vague, but I would say we'd have to wait and see. But it does seem like a lot of this stuff is going through. Like, we're, 4 or 5 days into the presidency, and things are just he's signing executive order left and right.
He's done more than Obama ever has done in these 4
well, yeah, or actually cut the ability of having done things that would implement certain forms of coercion on individuals. But just going forward in this topic of a cashless society, because of course it is a big topic around the world, if your currency isn't yours when it's in a bank, and a cashless society would put all of our currency through the banking system, doesn't that mean that our money is never ours in a cashless society?
I have to disagree fundamentally with what you just said. A cashless society does not necessarily mean that banks have control of your money. With the rise of Bitcoin and the blockchain technology, what we are witnessing is the decentralization of the conduit through which worth is passed. Because the blockchain technology allows for peer-to-peer transmission of wealth.
Well, let me rephrase that quickly then, because I should have added in centrally planned blockchain, which is something that people at the IMF are talking about, people at Davos are talking about, and etc.
Yeah, but I mean, blockchain as it exists today is not centrally controlled or centrally planned, and that's the beauty of it. Mm. And the beauty of it is that it's literally peer to peer, and it, to trade Bitcoin as it is today, you don't need a third party intermediary. You don't need to exchange. You don't need to exchange with a bank. You don't need to put money in a bank. If you have Bitcoin, you can freely transfer it to another party without the involvement of another party. And the thing that excites me the most, really, about Bitcoin is that there's no optionality and there's no futures on Bitcoin, meaning that you cannot sell a Bitcoin you do not own, and you cannot sell a Bitcoin that does not exist. And it's paradoxical, at least in my little mind, that a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, which does not exist in real form anywhere in the world. There's no physical Bitcoin you can pull out of your pocket and hand to somebody else. And this cryptocurrency, you cannot sell unless you own it. And yet you've got something like gold and silver, which is physical in its traditionally physical in its appearance and in its shape, and needs to be mined from the Earth's crust. Yet what the financial elites and the global banking community have done is they've created so many layers of derivatives for these very rare and dear things, gold and silver, the precious metals, which are real money. And these can be sold in infinite amounts. Gold can be sold that does not exist and will never exist. And it's being done on a regular basis by the financial elites and by the central banking community, or with the tacit approval of the central banking community, and this has caused a complete and utter travesty of injustice with regards to price discovery of these traditional and will be against stores of value as real money. We've got some big comeuppance to come, and I bring up the whole Bitcoin thing because I think Bitcoin bears watching, because at the end of the day, I think this cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, may represent maybe the most honestly traded, in terms of fairness and true price discovery, financial element we have in our whole financial universe right now.
Well, I think it's one of the greatest technological marvels or marvels, period, in the world of currency since the use of gold and silver. It's a beautiful thing. If it's not centrally planned, it's a great thing. And you're absolutely right when you're talking about Bitcoin. I'm a fan of Bitcoin. But, I mean, surely the globalists that are entrenched within the global monetary system aren't trying to free the monetary system. So my point is simply that there are a lot of globalists that are actually talking about incorporating blockchain into the SDR. So it just makes me wonder where exactly they're going with that.
Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take the goodness that blockchain or the real utility that blockchain offers and alter it. I mean, that in itself is a perverse thing. They're trying to take something that is the ultimate in peer-to-peer transmission of value and make it and put a third party in between it. And when you add a third party to something that good, it's like taking the shake out of a milkshake. It's just milk. It's no longer a milkshake. You can't put a third party in a blockchain transaction and have it maintained. It's like banking. All you've done then is you've taken blockchain and you've made it like banking. You might as well have a passbook and you might as well have hours of 9 till 4 because you know what? That is not going to cut it with blockchain. And as far as I'm concerned, anything that or any scheme that attempts to put a third party into a blockchain transaction defeats the whole reason why you'd want to use blockchain to begin with. So I think it's a dog that doesn't hunt. The thing that does scare me about the cryptocurrency, any cryptocurrency, Bitcoin included, is I do believe that there is a thing called an internet kill switch. And if the globalists ever get their backs into a corner difficult enough, they could turn the internet off. Yeah. Just remember that the internet was invented by DARPA, which is the part of the military-industrial complex in the United States. They created it, and I do believe they have the ability to turn it off.
And actually, back in October, the internet was basically given away to ICANN, which is regulated under the United Nations. And on top of that, the power grid is about 60 years outdated in the United States and Canada. So there's a lot of concerns on that end of things as well.
Yeah.
Well spotted, and that does bother me. But that's why I ultimately come back to, if you're going to have a means to preserve wealth in the long run, you want to own physical gold and physical silver, because physical gold and physical silver is not becoming to anyone or anything for its sustenance.
Yeah.
It's always been universally desirable, and it always will be.
No, it's preservation of value, and that's what's great about it. It's not just about investment; it's about insurance in the long term to be able to insure your wealth in case of the inevitable crash, which will eventually happen. John, you got something here that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, no. First, before I go into that, I just want to talk a little bit more about blockchain and its future implementations. Like, this technology is gonna really take over the whole system of governments, of how we deal with businesses, contracts, and so on. Like, there's a massive change coming in this technological advancement, which is basically blockchain is Internet 2.0, the whole technology behind it. And I do believe with all these cryptocurrencies coming out that we have out there, it's fantastic. I think we're going to see a free market approach to these cryptocurrencies, and I think they are going to win because every time we've seen this so many times, hundreds of times throughout history, where this paper fiat centralized system has failed over and over again. So it's a new approach where we are decentralizing ourselves from the centralized government. So it's a huge change that we haven't seen in a very long time, because we've been centralizing for over 100 years now. And now we're moving to the point where we could have, ended up with a tyrannical system. But I think we're actually, like, people like Donald Trump and others are the force that suddenly has come to fruition and pulling us back into the individualist sides and removing ourselves from this collectivist belief.
Just to add one more thing to that, I can envision a day when these cryptocurrencies are actually backed by physical gold and silver. And I believe that sort of a scheme could be extremely workable, and it might very well end up being the emphasis or the push that cleans up the shady dealings in the precious metals arena with derivatives. And I wholly agree with you that what could become of the blockchain technology and its effect on the way monetary transactions happen in our world could be as significant as what the internet has done to communication with email, texting and chat and all these things. And Facebook, like all these developments that have come on the back of the proliferation and development of the World Wide Web. I feel that Bitcoin could very well be the technology that changes the way things are transacted financially. But I don't think that precludes or excludes gold and silver from being a very, very strong pillar in that sort of a...
No, certainly not. I think gold and silver is better for 100-year terms for insurance rather than blockchain, which it's great for insurance to an extent, but there's still that limit that gold and silver covers. And just talking about social media and everything, including Bitcoin in that mix, there's things like Steemit where people are making tens of thousands of dollars on making blog posts, and they've made a social network into a blockchain.
It's decentralizing the payment from the centralized Facebook scheme where they are taking all of our information and using it. Now there's platforms with the blockchain approach that actually are giving everybody a piece of that money in ad streams and so on.
Oh, this stuff is mind-numbing after a while. So, John, you got you got something on this new House resolution.
Yeah. Well, listen, the other thing I would just like to point out, because we're sitting here and we're discussing the merits of blockchain, the reason why we're having this discussion about blockchain to begin with is because our current monetary regime, namely fiat, Keynesian based fiat monetary system with the absence of a gold backing, has failed humanity so severely. And then compounding that problem, we have regulators who refuse to enforce basic commodities law, where you see the whole price discovery mechanisms for traditional stores of money or stores of value and real money, gold and silver, regulators have allowed entities to sell these to vital forms of currency. They've allowed to sell them in amounts that they don't even exist in the real world. And when this occurs, you have severe mispricing, you have price disparities, and you would basically end up with a mess, and that's what we have. And I think that it's quite possible that the Bitcoin and the blockchain technology, as it is right now, could have a very, very big hand in cleaning up that injustice or inadequacy that we currently have. If regulators did their jobs, if regulators asked people who were selling 3 years worth of gold, annual mine production in gold in paper form in 3 days, how can you be selling this if you don't have the goods to back it up? And the reason, of course, they don't get called on it is because the people doing the selling are agents of the U.S. Treasury. And they're being given orders by the U.S. Treasury's chief broker, who is the New York Federal Reserve Trading Desk. The orders are coming out of the Treasury to the Fed, and the Fed is disseminating those directives to the big banks who operate in these markets where they sell the paper, because there's no way in a month of Sundays you should see 3 years worth of global gold production sold in paper form on a couple of exchanges inside of 3 days. And that's exactly what we saw from the minute it became apparent that Donald Trump won the election. Because just remember, folks, Donald Trump wasn't supposed to win the election. And as soon as it was announced that he had indeed done the unlikely and won the election, the first and the immediate response in the gold market was for gold to rally by $70.
Yeah, and then plummet.
And then the price rigging operation went into full effect, and then the gold was sold in paper form on the New York COMEX and in London from Wednesday evening until Friday afternoon, to the tune of 3.5 years worth of global mine production was dumped in paper form. This is after initial stiff rally, with the outcome being 2.5 days later, price of gold, instead of being up a significant amount, which should have happened, it was clubbed back into the ground to the tune of a couple $100. You see, and this is nothing but a sham and a fraud by a bunch of fraudulent crazies of the Keynesian mindset. And all I can say, if you really want to get it through your head what kind of a man John Maynard Keynes really was, go to Google and Google John Maynard Keynes and pervert and see what you come up with, and read it carefully. This man was despicable. This man was a disgrace to humanity, and central bankers following his utterances, you know what, frankly, maybe they belong in the same boat with him.
Well, not to mention, John Maynard Keynes was basically wrong about almost everything he ever predicted, and on top of that, we see people like Karl Marx, who had an interesting life just like John Maynard Keynes. If you type in Karl Marx and pervert, you'll find some interesting stuff as well. But that's the way that so many of these people are. I mean, so many people get their tips from Paul Krugman, who gets his tips straight from John Maynard Keynes. And, it's never worked. It's never been proven accurate. It's failed time and time again for 100 years.
Well, anyway, you know what? I want to follow that up. Paul Krugman, back in 1996 or 1997, wrote an op-ed, I believe it was in the New York Times, and he said back then that the Internet was a passing fad, and by 2005, the Internet would be no more important in our world than the fax machine. So Mr. Krugman sort of took a big swing and got a lot of air because he missed it big time. And with regards to John Maynard Keynes, who all these central bankers seem to worship like he walks on water, even John Maynard Keynes recognized the shortcomings of his beloved fiat currency that he propagated on mankind. And when it was pointed out by some right-thinking academics to him, the system he has designed is inherently flawed and would end up in devastation. His response at the time was, well, that doesn't really matter because in the long run we're all dead anyway. Well, from a financial infrastructure perspective, welcome to the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and I just wanted to make a quick point there that I know a lot of people laugh about is the fact that Paul Krugman thinks that you drive economic growth by breaking windows says a lot about his belief as it is. But I'll just leave it at that because of our time constraints, John.
So moving forward on the point of manipulation, Rob, I want to talk about a bill that has been introduced in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's called the H.R. 193, and it proposes to pull the United States out of the United Nations and all of its underlying organizations. With this, a withdrawal from the IMF have to happen. Do you think the United States will finally dissolve its corrupt slush fund, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, with this, since it's holding most of the special drawing rights?
Yeah, boy, that's a real mouthful. Whether the U.S. government ever actually sheds light on the true wealth contained in the Exchange Stabilization Fund. My feeling is that they would be extremely reluctant to do that, because I think, at least in my view, I believe that the Exchange Stabilization Fund possesses wealth that's unimaginable. You see, I believe that the U.S. government has a light side and a dark side. And when I say that, they have an on-book representation that we see manifested as the federal debt. And that debt is acknowledged to be something around $20 trillion or maybe a little more now. I believe the Exchange Stabilization Fund is the other side of the teeter-totter. And I believe that on the Exchange Stabilization Fund, in dark money, they may possess that much or more in positive net worth. But that money is never acknowledged to exist. You see, and it's been long been my belief and my contention that when foreigners are selling U.S. government bonds, which we know empirically because the Treasury tells us about the reductions of the holdings in U.S. government debt of the likes of China and Japan, two of America's biggest, in the last 20 years, two of America's biggest financiers. And they've been dumping U.S. government debt on a wholesale level. My question is, who's been buying it? Because the Fed does not acknowledge that they're undergoing any QE right now. You see, and it's my belief that the U.S. Treasury is actually buying that debt with dark dollars in the Exchange Stabilization Fund. And because they are buying those bonds with dark dollars, they are not showing up on the balance sheet of any central bank, and they seem to be disappearing into a black hole. This is why when China, over a 5-month period, sells $400 billion worth of U.S. government bonds, and you don't see a corresponding $400 billion rise in anyone else's account, you have to start asking, where did those bonds go? And I think they've actually just been taken off the public ledgers, and they're now on the dark side of the Treasury's balance sheet, which is the Exchange Stabilization Fund. This has long been my contention, and I believe it to be accurate. And just remember, folks, the Exchange Stabilization Fund was created in 1934 by an act of Congress. It is not subject to oversight by Congress, however, and it produces absolutely no financials, and it's operated at the discretion of the Secretary of the Treasury and the President of the United States. And they are authorized to operate in any market. They are subject to no laws in America, and they literally have a green light to do whatever they want.
No, absolutely. And you've actually woken up a lot of people to what the ESF is. It's unfortunate that there's so many people that don't, as it is, don't know what the Federal Reserve is, even though they print their currency. But the fact is, very few people really know what the ESF is.
Yeah, well, the way the ESF was created, first of all, they took the valuation and the gold that they confiscated in 1933 to create the ESF fund in the first place. Now, most interestingly, after when they started to think in a global scale and started to implement this global organization, is they actually the gold that they used to create the ESF, they actually used that towards creating the IMF. From my readings that I found, and I found that very interesting. No. If you want to just chip in on that.
Actually, the IMF came later. The ESF was created at the same time that gold was confiscated from the American public. Gold was confiscated in 34, or was it late 33? And then 6 months, Americans had to, by law, turn in all of their gold coin to the U.S. Treasury, and they were paid at the time $20.67, I believe, per ounce that they turned in. And then 6 months later, the gold was revalued up to $35 and change. And this revaluation of the gold created a $3 billion windfall in 1934 dollars. That $3 billion was used as the seed money to start the Exchange Stabilization Fund. The IMF and the World Bank were created as adjuncts to the Bretton Woods monetary system, which was created after the Second World War in 1949. But I mean, listen, my view towards what's currently going on, the notion that there's any activity at all or any inkling at all to have America pull out of the UN or possibly have less to do with the IMF and this globalist apparatus, to me it's all welcome news, and the more of that we see, the better. The thing that would excite me probably more than anything would be to see President Trump, by executive order for a very, very transparent audit of the sovereign gold reserve. I think that would be an amazing thing, and I wouldn't put it past him to do it. It just seems to me that Trump has had enough of these globalist memes and these globalist antics in terms of their world domination, and it just seems to me that until I see otherwise, I'm going to take the man at his word, and I think he really does care about Americans, and I think he does give a couple of wits about humanity, and I do think that he believes that the people running the show have had more than a fair share at running it and haven't done a good job. The stewardship of the world's reserve currency has been conducted in a very disgraceful manner and very unbecoming of what the founders of the great United States of America did when they penned the Constitution.
Absolutely. And actually, during the election, Donald Trump endorsed the Audit the Fed bill, which was just reintroduced by Senator Rand Paul and Thomas Massie. And that's a good thing. I mean, an audit's a good thing. It isn't the end all. It would be good for the Federal Reserve to just be simply abolished, in my personal opinion. But it's definitely a good step in the right direction. And just talking about what you mentioned about the confiscation of gold back in the 1930s, it's interesting because we are lucky enough to have a friend named Anthem Blanchard whose father started the organization which actually brought back the gold to the American people back in the 1970s. And he's had a lot of insight on that as well. But I think what John was getting at was more not that the IMF became.
I think it was seed funding, basically, into the initial funding that the United States put into, like money into the IMF. I believe it was that they used the Exchange Stabilization Fund to do.
Later on, after the Exchange Stabilization Fund was created, later on when the IMF was created, they used some of the gold initially
towards the IMF.
Well, the Exchange Stabilization Fund is authorized to act in any market, and understand that anything the Exchange Stabilization Fund does is by edict and by its very description is deemed to be in the interests of national security. And as such, they don't acknowledge anything that's in the interest of national security. For national security reasons, they don't have to acknowledge whether it happened or not. They can deny all existence and all happening. If anything that's to do with the Exchange Stabilization Fund, they can completely and utterly deny. And if you want to really get your head around what goes on with the Exchange Stabilization Fund, I recommend all of your viewers and your listeners to go to marketskeptics.com. It's a site that was created a number of years ago by a chap named Eric de Carbonell. And if you look at the right margin on his homepage, you'll see a heading that says something to the effect of something I've been afraid to blog about, the ESF, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, and how it works. And if you click on that link, you'll be taken to a 5-part YouTube series which explains how the ESF was set up and its conduct and what it does in markets and its latitude to deal in any market, and how the U.S. government remains extremely tight-lipped about its operation, its conduct, and what it does or can and cannot do. And if you watch this 5-part series, which I have at least a dozen times, and need to watch it again, I seem to get something new out of it every time I watch it. But you realize that this entity has the power to do literally anything, anywhere, at any time, and it doesn't need to ask anyone if it's okay. So
yeah, absolutely. Well, actually, John here did a report not that long ago using the Exchange Stabilization Fund, Slush Fund, and War Chest, the book, as a source, as well as a few other books, and we're still waiting on that $300 fine for releasing that that information to the public. As it says in the book, we're not allowed to speak about it.
What I bumped into was a GAO book, the Government Accountability Office's book, where they actually went into the structure of the ESF back in I think it was the mid-'60s when they did this interrogation of their operations, and I found a beautiful organizational chart that shows all their offices around the world that they use, and they're based in every single financial capital around the world, so they could do the trades easily together with their bank partners.
Sure, absolutely. Anyway, I do recommend the de Carbonell expose on YouTube. It's phenomenal.
Absolutely, I've watched it myself, and he's definitely brilliant.
Oh, it's fantastic. I love that, watching that, and I watch it a couple of times myself as well.
Absolutely, it can be mind-numbing, but it's very important information on a very nefarious organization. But I wanted to move on with the Dow Jones Industrial hitting 20,000 for the first time, up 1,000 since the election. People are excited, but I think they might be a bit too quick to the draw, because this may be good in the temporary, but it looks like a major bubble reminiscent of the 2008 burst. Why should people be concerned about the major uptick in the Dow, NASDAQ, and S&P, and why exactly is this happening?
Well, okay. As I pointed out, and we discussed just a little bit earlier, when Trump was first acknowledged to have won the presidency, the initial reaction of the gold was to shoot higher. Also the initial reaction in the equity markets. Understand, we learned that Trump had won the presidency at around 8 or 8:30 in the evening, and at that time of night, the stock market is not open per se, but the equity futures markets for the Dow Jones and the NASDAQ are trading, and the Dow futures had spiked lower to the tune of about 800 points, as gold was spiking 70 points higher. We know for a fact that it was intervention that turned the price, or the so-called price, the paper price of gold, which turned the paper price of gold around and slammed it down. And the equity markets, in my view, would have been taking a cue from what was going on in the gold market. Had the gold market continued to ascend, or the gold price continued to ascend as it should have, I believe that the equity prices would have continued to plummet. And that's unacceptable to the price riggers, the fools at the Federal Reserve, and the fools that control our markets. And they wanted to send a message that this was good, which is why they turned gold down. And then, in essence, with the heavy-handedness they conducted in the gold market, the brain-dead fools in the equity market then thought it was safe to buy equities again. Listen, our markets are not markets. Our markets are crime scenes, and this
totally artificial.
This kind of activity will lead to a very, very bad ending at some point in time, and I would say that very likely, any time now, we could see some real fireworks here, because.
Well, absolutely. Just looking at the charts are kind of terrifying when you study the 10-year chart for the Dow, and looking at when the crash happened, or when the recession happened in 2008, and studying where it was going then and now where it's going now. And in comparison, it's going to hit rock bottom a lot harder than it did in 2008 when it does, because of course it's been manipulated, it's been pushed off, and it's gained a lot of steam, and it looks really bad when you look at the chart. But of course all you hear in the news is this is a great thing. And while it is a good thing in the temporary, and I'm happy to see it go up, it's not going to continue in that uptick, and people are jumping the gun too much, just like we saw in 2007. We saw so many people going, wow, this is so amazing, this is such a great environment right now, And then, of course, we know what happened next. So it's just something that I feel like a lot more people should understand, because people on both sides, I don't think, quite understand what this means in the long run. And I feel like, of course, because fundamentals aren't exactly followed to the extent that they used to be when it comes to the monetary system, when it comes to the markets, it's hard to say, or it's hard to put a date on something. You can't say this is going to happen on that day in 3 months.
Listen,
there was a time where it was a bit more possible.
What we are witnessing in our capital markets, it's a big Kool-Aid party. And if you want to know how Kool-Aid parties end, ask the people who lived in Jonestown, Guyana, under Jim Jones, if you happen to know that name from historical record. You'll have trouble talking to anybody from Jonestown or any of Jim Jones' followers, though, because they all drank the Kool-Aid and they all died together. And
and the ones that didn't drink the Kool-Aid are brain damaged and unable to speak to this day. So it's terrible.
So enjoy your Kool-Aid and make sure you drink it to the last drop, because what is happening in our capital markets is not sustainable. And the reason it's not sustainable, folks, because we have Keynesian-minded bankers creating infinite amounts of debt or credit. And, we live on a finite planet, and any rational thinking human being should realize that when you create infinite amounts of money in a finite environment, that story doesn't end well, and nor will this one end well. And how that ends, traditionally, it ends with the currency's value falling to its true intrinsic value, which is zero. And this has happened many times in human history when this experiment with fiat money is practiced to the last drop. And this,
interestingly, we're coming up on the 1,000th year anniversary of this system in 1024 AD in China. And you'd think people would learn in 1,000 years, but apparently not.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I think the Chinese are well versed in it, and the Chinese have a pretty good idea how this will end, which is why the Chinese have been showing a great deal of effort in trying to convert U.S. dollar debt into real tangible things, which is why they've been investing so heavily in Africa, and which is why they've been investing in real things like ports, and why they've been investing in critical infrastructure all over the world. And it's not because they have a penchant for collecting things. It's just that they know that the reserves that they currently own, which are denominated largely in U.S. government debt, at one day will be worth zero.
All fiat money always reverts to its natural value of zero. It always has, always will, and sometimes it takes longer than other times, but it's always headed in that direction. So finally, I wanted to kind of get to this. I know you've kind of talked about it loosely throughout this interview, but I'd like to ask, what's your 2017 forecast for gold and silver in total? Like, where do you see gold and silver going this year?
Listen, for the longest time, I have felt that gold and silver should be going up. I don't ever recommend people buy gold and silver with leverage. I don't ever recommend people, using futures to get leverage that way. I think people, I'm often asked when do I think it's a good time to buy physical gold or silver, and my attitude has long been, I don't think there's any such thing as a bad day to buy physical gold or silver. No. Because my attitude is, as long as you're not spending your grocery money, you buy it, you put it away, and one day, I think you'll be rewarded extremely handsomely for having done so. And at some point, the current system we're in will break, and when it breaks, I think things could change very dramatically and exceedingly fast.
Absolutely. Just going from the 1970s to 2002, the amount of people that had gold for all those years, and they're going, well, it's not going anywhere. And then they sold it off around 2002. And between 2002 and 2012, I mean, all of them are kicking themselves to this day about it, because if they only held on to that insurance for their value, they would be in a much better place today. But of course, a lot of people lose faith, and it's unfortunate because gold and silver has always shown itself to preserve value and have extremely great upticks over the century.
Yeah, and anyway, my feeling is when it breaks, you will either own it or you won't, because when the current system does break, I don't believe you're going to be able to buy it. It will not be for sale.
Yeah, no currency will be able to buy it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, again, thanks for joining us, Mr. Kirby, and I want our viewers to check out kirbyanalytics.com. Always great information on that site. And actually, I wanted to mention, because I saw that you have released a novel. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about that?
The novel's been written for quite a number of years now. And truth be known, I only ever produced 3 manuscripts, and it's never really been put to print. But I have an electronic version of it, and I do send it to people if they ask for it, and I don't ask for any money.
Wow. Well, hey, information for free, and this is very crucial information to know about, so that's a great thing. Well, thank you very much for joining us again, and I hate to be a party pooper at the end there with the whole issue of the Dow Jones Industrial, but the truth is far more important than having a field day and saying, wow, this is great, everything's going to be okay, because while there's a lot of hope and a lot of great things happening right now, and a lot of awakening among a lot of the populace, there's also still those crucial problems that continue to break down the monetary system and the markets, and people need to understand what this means.
We just need to be diligent and full suit, and this is the time to change now. We have somebody in place that is leading it, like the free world. So it's time to roll on that, like go full force and really run with it. And start pushing these ideas out that we've been really fighting for over many decades, and now is the time to let it come into fruition and let us win.
I've been adamant about saying that we will have to wait and see what happens, but you're definitely right that there is a sign of something really big happening, and in the end, it all comes down to the individual. It comes down to the individual's understanding what's going on and being able to protect themselves, protect their family from the inevitable economic crash, being able to ensure their wealth, being able to be self-sustainable and not depend on the state or monetary system to take care of them. So I'll just end it at that. Thank you again, Mr. Kirby, for joining us, and we hope to see you soon.
It's been my pleasure, guys. Look forward to any time in the future.